Good evening and welcome back to Sports Talk ATL. I am Chase Earl, joined by Alex Lord. The Atlanta Falcons. We talked about this being a tricky matchup with all of the injuries, and when we talked about it, we discussed it. We didn't quite know the severity of everybody that was going to be out. It turned out pretty much everybody was out. I mean, they were dealing with a lot. They were down to their fourth and fifth string corners. They had Richie Grant playing nickel, and we don't even think he should be on the field, let alone playing nickel. Kevin King goes down on the first drive. So it was not an advantageous position, but still, the way that they lost, and you talked about getting carved up by Bo Nix, they got more than carved up. I mean, this guy was unbelievable, and a lot of it wasn't very difficult. It was throw it 5 yards and run for 25. I mean, there was a lack of execution, a lack of effort, a lack of talent. Defensively, it was one of the worst performances you'll see. I mean, it was just as bad as the Jags against the Lions. I don't know how many people saw it, but it was as bad as it possibly get. If that game was competitive at all, Bo Nix would have had 5 or 6 touchdowns, and there's little doubt in my mind. I mean, there was absolutely nothing the Falcons could do, and it was not hard at all for this Broncos team. The offense was also left a lot to be desired. I'll go ahead and say that I'm not nearly as concerned, but this defense, particularly with injuries, and this is something we talked about before the season, like, we were kind of confident about the starters, but we were always like, what happens if one of these corners goes down? Well, what happens if 3 of these corners go down? And you see what happens when 3 of these guys go down. I mean, it's miserable and it's worrisome. I mean, listen, the NFC South still firmly within the Falcons' grasp. They have a 1.5 game lead, de facto 2.5 game lead because they own all the tiebreakers, but still, the future, if they cannot get healthy with this defense, is a problem. And it's not just a problem against the Broncos. It's a problem against everybody. Even the Panthers later in the season. This defense, the way they looked on Sunday, is not going to be good enough to hold off the Saints and Bucks.
New head coach, new quarterback. This is the same old Falcons. And no matter how much money you pour into it, no matter how many draft picks you make, no matter the changes you make on the coaching staff, this team reminds you they are exactly who they've always been. Now, I will say, no team in the NFL, very few teams could have looked good losing their 3 of their top 4 corners and several other defensive starters. So I'm not going to necessarily hold that to them. What I will hold is the effort, the game plan, the preparation. I mean, what do we got these Wednesday walkthrough crap. How about some tackling drills on Wednesday? That might work out Raheem Morris. And I just wrote something about it, sportstalkatl.com. You can check it out. Raheem Morris, defensive-minded head coach. Defense sucks. This great motivator, this guy that connects with everybody. They looked lifeless on Sunday. What exactly do you do besides smile, look good, and your 3-piece suits on Sunday? What exactly do you do? I mean, you hired Jimmy Lake. That's been a flop. Zach Robinson has worked out thus far. For 1 for 2, I don't think is really cutting it, especially when the side of the ball that is obviously the weak point is your quote-unquote expertise. Like, I could overlook the injuries because truly nobody could overcome that. Like, we were worried about depth and the illustration, the scenario we played out in the offseason was like, if AJ Terrell goes down, just one guy, one AJ Terrell goes down, this cornerback group looks, closer to pathetic than even serviceable. And nobody can overcome 3 cornerback injuries to your top 4 guys. It's just not possible. But what my problem was just like the lack of focus. Like, it looked like they were mailing it in until the bye week against a team and the Broncos that had no business beating them as bad as they did. Bo Nix's career day aside, they had no business beating them that badly.
I mean, that's the kind of performance you see from a lame duck head coach like Doug Peterson. We saw like a guy that that's going to get fired
against a Lions team that is the class of the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, against the Broncos.
This is the Broncos.
Yeah, against a rookie quarterback, like, you've got to figure out a game plan to keep that one competitive. It is absolutely insane, and it does remind you. I mean, I'm going to skip over the Arthur Smith thing and go to the Dan Quinn thing because that's who Raheem Morris coached under. It reminds you very much of Dan Quinn, where you're like, what the hell was that? And again, defensive head coach who has done a poor job defensively. Dan Quinn could never get that defense going, and Raheem Morris is following right in those footsteps. And then a motivator, which is what Dan Quinn and Raheem Morris, that doesn't always keep his guys focused and motivated to do the task at hand.
It feels more like a substitute teacher who's just like trying to be cool and connect to the kids more so than like, hey, I'm your boss, basically. I'm not your friend. I'm going to tell you and the NFL is much different than any other level because they are closer to, being equals than, a head coach in college when he has to, he's got kids. These are grown men, but that dynamic doesn't just completely go away. It doesn't completely disappear. This team isn't good enough where Andy Reid can just trust the veterans on the team to kind of, guide themselves or crack the whip on themselves. Andy Reid and the Bill Belichick Patriots, they had that. We don't have that luxury. Somebody has got to crack the whip on this team, and it's not going to be nice guy Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think the funny thing is, though, I do want to talk us off the ledge here because at the end of the day, the Falcons are 6-5. And when you look at what this game entailed, you're talking about a West Coast road trip, second road game, and the entire defense. Like, it was always going to be a very, very tall task even to keep this one competitive. Now, sure, are we definitely concerned with how they looked? Yes, we have every right to be concerned. But going into the bye week, I'm not totally shocked that we looked pretty damn poor, all things considered, and everything is in front of them. And 2 weeks ago, we were praising Raheem Morris and giving him all that. So I don't want to just flip a switch just like that and be like, Raheem Morris is Dan Quinn. This is not salvageable because you still have a very comfortable lead in the division and you have a very favorable schedule and it's going to get hard right after the bye week, but everything's right in front of them to right all of this that we've seen over the last few weeks, especially if you go back to that Seahawks game, right it wrong, win the division, get a home playoff game. All that stuff's right in front of them. So I'm not going to totally say, hey, crack the whip on Raheem Morris. His seat needs to be sizzling, but I will leave the door open that if things don't get better and they get worse, which we saw in the first year under Dan Quinn when this team started out 4-0, 5-0, and 6-1 overall and missed the postseason altogether, especially in this division when you had a 3-game lead and have pretty much taken care of the entire division, that seat shouldn't just be simmering hot after one season. It should be out from under him. It is that bad. So that door is there. I'm going to leave it open. Which door are you going to walk through, Raheem Morris? Because one of them, you shouldn't have a job after this year. I don't know if Arthur Blank has the balls to do it. I don't think he does because he doesn't want to go into another coaching change at this age. But the other is you win the South, you do what we all predicted to happen at the season, and you did a pretty damn good job, and we move on and we keep trying to get better.
Reality, there's 0% chance Raheem Morris gets fired. I don't care if they lose the rest of their games. Because Arthur Blank, to a fault, is loyal. More than above all else.
Well, and that's why I went to
Arthur Blank is loyal. At every waking move, you could trace every decision that this Falcons organization has made, for better or worse, and you could trace the motivating, the driving factor is Arthur Blank's loyalty. So there's no way he gets fired. With that being said, this team is still good enough, even, with injuries and maybe not being fully prepared, to still just go and basically coast to a home playoff game. What I have, sort of wrapped my brain around, that wild card team that comes to Atlanta for the first playoff game ever in Mercedes-Benz Stadium, it's going to be that second runner-up to whether it's the NFC North, probably the NFC North is my guess, is going to come to Atlanta and absolutely wipe the floor.
Yeah. I mean, it could be the 49ers. It could be the Packers. It could be it's going to be a very good
Vikings team. Yeah. I mean,
yeah. But listen, I want to go back to Arthur Blank because you said something, and I think this whole thing goes back to him. No matter what, there's been one constant in the coaching changes, in the regime changes, everything. There's one constant in all of this, and it's the man making the decisions up top and his unwillingness to go outside of this family-oriented style that he wants to have. That was the reason Raheem Morris was hired. That was the reason they didn't go with Belichick. They want to have this culture of, hey, buddy, we're all family here.
Doesn't work.
There's a constant in all of that, and it's Arthur Blank. So when you're looking at this and you're like, is this the same old Falcons? Well, should we be surprised?
No.
Should we be surprised? Because the guy up there refuses to make any changes with himself.
And don't come at me when they suddenly turn it around and maybe win a game they shouldn't have won. We got the Vikings coming up or the Chargers. The Chargers are a damn good football team. We beat them in Atlanta. I think, maybe we'll be slight underdogs or maybe it's a toss-up.
But they're still traveling across the country.
But it doesn't change the fact that the ultimate destination is still going to be the same. I'm predicting it right now. Even coming off the worst loss of this season, going into the bye week, the Falcons are still going to win the division, maybe 9-8, maybe 10-7, and they're going to get get their butts kicked in that wild card round by a second place division team. And it's going to be flat out embarrassing. And we're going to have the same conversations in the offseason that we're having right now about Raheem Morris, about Arthur Blank. Is Kirk Cousins the guy? Is Jimmy Lake going to be brought back? These are all conversations that we're going to be having, whenever it is.
We're starting them right now.
Yes, and it's going to be the same way this offseason. I guarantee you.
And nothing changes. And listen,
and,
like I said.
And Raheem Morris takes after the Dan Quinn, Arthur Blank, loyal to a fault. I would be shocked unless there was an absolute another collapse like this if Jimmy Lake is not brought back. I would be shocked.
No, I completely agree with you.
You shouldn't be shocked either when he is brought back.
Yeah, and listen, the way things are going, the way things are run from this organization to get to that ultimate destination, which we all want, is a Super Bowl. It's not going to happen. No. It's just not going to happen. Very disappointing result. We'll get to college football after the break.